What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Be the Standard. I'm Denny Paul, your host, and I'm joined here as usual with my co-host and best friend, Mike Burns.
What's up, Dan?
What's happening? So before we get started, as always, I'd like you to go ahead, subscribe to the podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Rumble. What that does is it provides you with up-to-date content as we release it. You'll get an email. You'll know when all of our latest videos are released. Also, check us out on Instagram. You can find us at Be the Standard Podcast for the business page, and Denny_Paul12 is my personal page. And then, as always, Mike Burns 1. Also, check us out on LinkedIn. I've been putting up a lot of content there as well. And we're on there as Be the Standard Podcast. Go follow that page as well. Again, all the content's on there. And before we jump into our first topic today, what I'd like to do is first off, just thank everybody for their support. We've been getting a lot of feedback, a lot of constructive criticism that I've really enjoyed. A lot of support. I think we've been on this or been at this for 3-4 weeks now, and the amount of viewership and support we're getting, I think, is just
it's impressive.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely better than I expected, and that's really all you can hope for, right? So
that's it, man.
Again, just very much appreciate that. And one of the things that we got for feedback was, the audio could be a little bit better. So I'm sure for anybody who's watching, not listening, you can see that we have these really cool new mics that I'm pretty excited about. They sound perfect. So again, just want to thank you guys for your support. Thank you for your feedback. And Mike and I will certainly implement all of the things that we think make sense. And just very much appreciate it.
Gotta give a shout out to Jeff for all the stuff he does behind the scenes there with that mixer. I mean,
absolutely.
Great.
Jeff Bolte of Claris Multimedia. He, we really couldn't be doing this without him. So huge shout out to him, and very big thank you, really, for all that he does. And he's sitting over there right now making sure that the audio is perfect, and I'm sure it will be from now moving forward. I think it'll be perfect. So again, thanks, Jeff. Thanks to everybody for their support as well. So for our first topic today, we're going to be talking about dependency. And ultimately, basically what that means is a state in which you need something or someone just to be able to function in a normal state. And, that can be, a person, that could be a substance, that could be technology. But we really wanted to touch upon what it means to just be dependent.
How about this substance? That bad?
That's... Yeah, well, it depends, right? We're going to get into that. We're definitely going to touch upon alcohol, as a dependency and drugs and things like that. So, yeah, certainly. But it all depends, right? Everything in moderation is fine. But basically a cause. We're going to start with causes of dependency, right? Like what causes you to be dependent on either of those things, and it's certainly not limited to those things, right? Yep. But basically what it is it's a reliance. It's a reliance on, that can be emotional support, validation, fulfillment. I think a lot of times you'll see people are too reliant on people or their opinions, right?
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I think a lot of it comes down to, in other words, you were saying, is someone, they're usually trying to fill a hole somewhere in them, whether it be emotionally, spiritually, mentally, whatever. And not always, but usually there's some kind of lack and they're trying to fill it, and then it fills it temporarily, and then it becomes their crutch. And that's what they use, going forward for everything. So,
yeah. And I'm not going to call out anybody in particular, right? But there is one person I know that it's somebody that I'm close to who just is always very reliant on just other people's opinions, right?
Yeah.
This person's also very opinionated. They're very strong-minded. They're a very, very strong-minded person with their own opinions. But before their decisions are made, they got to validate, from multiple sources and kind of poll all their friends. and see what everybody else thinks, as opposed to, this is what I feel, this is what I want, so I'm going to go get it.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. Just like we talk about here, like be the standard, literally setting a standard for yourself, and you're really not doing that. If you have to poll all your friends and just to make any decision, but especially any important life decision, I mean, you can get advices from your mentors, that's okay, but then you ultimately got to come up with your own decision and live with your decision, right? A lot of people aren't willing to do that. And this person, I don't know who you're talking about, and I don't want to know, but but yeah, that's definitely not a way to be. You're dependent on other people's views and opinions of yourself. I feel like that might be a younger thing. I feel like as we get older, we shed that a little bit, but I don't think it's completely gone, because I know people will do that probably their entire lives, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that it's like anything else, as far as, looking for that external validation, right? I think it's like anything else, like even doing this. Like, a lot of people are going to talk about the things that we're doing, right? Or similar topics, but you got to have your own perspective.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, you can't just, like, I can't talk about motivation and discipline and just go regurgitate everything, somebody else is saying, like a Jocko Willing. I have to have my own perspective, and I have to have almost like your own IP, right? Your own intellectual property, and develop your own thesis like that. Like, you go to medical school and you become a doctor. They make you, in order to get your doctorate, they make you write, I think it's called a thesis, where you got to write, this long dissertation as to what you're bringing to the medical field. And it has to be all of your own thoughts and your own ideas.
And it has to be original.
And that's kind of how you need to proceed in just about anything you do, and especially decision-making for your own life, and being dependent for somebody else for that validation or that fulfillment or that emotional support is, you're setting yourself back, and you're not going to get what you want. You're going to possibly just get what other people might want for you.
Yeah. And what do they really know? You know what I mean? They have their own biases. They're not you, and they don't live your life. So you definitely never want to rely on the opinion of others. And they may be well-meaning, right? They think they're giving you great advice, but ultimately, it comes down to you analyzing, taking information, just like we talk about leadership today. Taking information, that's cool from anybody. You should listen, but then you critically think about it and you make your own decision.
Yeah, and ultimately, what this does, when you're constantly seeking that validation, and if you're doing that for somebody else, you're causing enabling behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what does that do? What does that bring back to what we talked about in episode maybe 3?
Yeah.
Where does that bring that person? It brings them to a victim mentality.
Yep.
Right? If you cause these enabling behaviors, or you're contributing to somebody else's lack of independence and autonomy, there you go. You're creating that victim mentality, and they're absorbing all of that and ultimately feeling sorry for themselves.
Yep.
And when things don't go their way, right away, they're going to be like, I'm just the victim of it. And yeah.
So I just thought about this. So you were talking about that, Denny, is the validation, seeking external validation is really in dependency. And this might segue into something you're already going to talk about, is the social media thing, right? Is how if someone puts a post out there, immediately you validate yourself or that post or whatever on the likes or views it gets. And you will continue to judge yourself off of that. And some people do it just for the like. Some people put stuff out there just because they want to put good into the world. I feel like that's what we're doing, right? We want to put good content out there. We want to put our content out there the way we see things. And if it resonates with you, great. If it never does, okay, that's cool too. But we're not, ultimately, you're not going for the clicks and the likes and being dependent on those clicks and likes.
Yeah. And I was definitely going to get to the technology piece of it. And I think, when we first started doing this podcast and I first started releasing the episodes, the first 2 days or something like that, I'm like, oh, how many likes do we have?
Well, it's your passion, bro. That's different. So,
well, no, but it was consuming me, and like I have a job.
Okay, all right,
right. So I'm like thinking.
I didn't know that.
So I was thinking like, okay, how many likes do we have? How many views do we have? Like, how are people receiving what we're putting out? That was obviously very important to me, because if we're not putting out things people want to see, like, it's time to pack it up. It's early for that, but that's kind of my thought process is like, we need to make sure that we're putting out things that people want to hear and people want to, be involved with. So I caught myself doing that. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to check it, every few hours instead of like, let me refresh.
Was it like that? I can see that. Though,
it was
man.
at first.
You put so much effort into it, though. I think in the infancy stages of something, I think that's okay.
And I think I'm just putting it into the context of this podcast, but in the context of just overall technology.
Yeah.
I still struggle with like having my phone too much.
I feel like everyone does it. I think you're lying if you don't.
But I was thinking to myself, like when it started and how this developed. And for me, remember when we deployed, like they had just come out. I don't know if they had just come out with it, but like we had all just gotten Blackberries.
Well, we got the Blackberries because we heard they would work where we were going.
Exactly.
That's why we got them. They were out before.
They were out before, but before that, I can't think of a time before that where I was like just attached to my phone.
Absolutely not.
But when then we had access to our wives.
That was my first. That was my first smartphone, I think. Right? Is that a smartphone?
It was a smartphone, BlackBerry. Right? I think it was a smartphone.
Smart enough.
Smart, yeah, smarter than me.
Yeah.
No, but like, that's the first time I look back and I remember being like, I have to be looking at my phone all the time.
Yeah.
Right. It was because we had access to our girlfriends, our wives at the time. And so we're waiting for text. So every opportunity I had, I'm like pulling my phone out, I'm looking at it. Yeah. And so then we get home. By the time we're home, phones are better, smarter, more apps. They were coming out with more apps. You could do more things on it. I wasn't dating at the time, but you could date on it. You could do anything on your phone now.
Yeah.
And there's this constant like access to anything you want. And so after getting home, it just continued, right? And then I get into a sales career, and anybody who's in sales knows that you have to be like readily accessible all the time.
All the time.
You have to be on all the time. So now, here I am 8 years later into my sales career, and it's like, did I get an email?
Can I ask a question on that? Just not to segue. I'm just curious, just from my perspective. In the sales world, what is your flash to bank time? Like you get an email, like how long is it supposed to be before you reply? What's the industry standard?
There really isn't one. I mean, it depends. Like so when you're in sales, you're working for your paycheck.
Right.
You obviously I have a salary, obviously, but I don't work for my salary. I work for what I can make in addition to that. So it's almost like you feel like obligated to respond as quick as possible because you're trying to close deals as fast as you can. Right. You get paid as fast as you can, So it's constantly just being available. And that's the one downside I'd say it's an upside and a downside to being in a sales career is you ultimately, I don't want to say fall in love with, but it turns into a chase for money. Even if like you're not like a materialistic person, you're trying to buy all these things, you're still trying to meet and exceed the expectations that your management's put in front of you. So ultimately, that translates into more dollars.
Right, but still, it goes to that instant gratification too. Like I've watched other podcasts, people talk who are in the sales world, like you are, talk about when that email comes in. They're quick to do it because they know that they get that dopamine hit when that email hits because there's possibility of money there. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
whether it goes or not.
Yep.
Yeah,
and that's 100% true. You do get that dopamine hit. You do get that like almost like a rush and adrenaline. Mm-hmm. It's real. Yeah. And that's one of the exciting parts of having a sales career is you get that rush often. And it's
makes sense.
Yeah, but that's one of the things it's my career that's keeping me addicted to technology, right? Then you take and now just in present state, I have my sales career. Now I have the podcast stuff. So now I'm checking social media to see how our engagement looks there, whether it's Instagram, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook. Like I'm constantly checking it. And it's not like I don't check it very long. Like I check, okay,
I want to get your girlfriend down here and ask her.
She yells at me all the time, dude. All the time. Yep. Like and she's not wrong, so I can't say anything.
Yeah, so I can just
when I try to defend myself, she's like,
"There's no defending yourself." And I can't because I do the same as you. Like I do everything I don't use laptops for much. I can do 90% of the work that needs to be done, whether it's emails, calls, the posts for the workouts the next day, setting up posts, anything. Like there's very little that I cannot do from my phone. And one thing, I've obviously had my wife call me out on it many, many times, and justifiably so. Like, get home from a long day, haven't seen each other all day, and I'm on my phone doing these things. But does he care what I'm doing? No. You're like, to her, you're just. I'm not present. I'm not there. So what I try to do this. Believe me, this is something I'm always going to work on. But all right, if I know I'm going to leave the gym or whatever, I'm going to try to do all that stuff before I leave. And when I get home, don't use the phone.
I certainly need to get better with that. I mean, at least once a week, probably twice. She's like, because there's a swamp behind the house, in the back, way in the back. She's like, I'm gonna take your fucking phone. I'm gonna throw it in the swamp. Like, she says it like once or twice a week, and dude. I mean, it's funny, but it's not, because I need to be better. And it's not just now. It's like I've had this issue for years now.
I would challenge our viewers and listeners. I would like to know how long you guys have gone without your phone. Like, being dependency, like that is, I don't care. Everybody has their dependency to their technology, and I would love to know how long you've been able to do it without it, like completely without it. Like, people do. I've gone without social media. That's impressive enough. But if you can be a week without your phone, I would be really impressed.
No, not a week. Definitely not.
How about a day?
Probably not. Not with work.
Yeah.
I genuinely do need it for work, but it's the other stuff that I need to stay away from.
And not to go down this rabbit trail, but I want to just go there real quick. So, you ever had your phone break?
Yeah.
And not have a replacement
I've had to
right
be
away?
out of the phone. Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Never more than a few hours, though. I've gone right to Apple.
Well, see, that's my point. I want you to go with, like, at first, like, you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You feel really strange. Like, I don't have this thing that keeps me connected to the world.
Yeah.
But after a while, it feels good. Like, because we forgot, like you just talked about before deployment, before we had the dependency on these technologies, what that feeling that we had. Yeah. You know what I mean? Not having that.
I bet if you could go back and remember those days and like really be like present in that time, you'd be like, I bet you were just more present and engaging and more like involved with like the people you were around. And like, even like we all do it now. Like, you go out to dinner, your phone's there. It's on the bar. It's on the table.
Look where my phone is.
Yeah.
Right here. Why's it got to be there?
Mine's right here.
It's crazy.
But that's just it.
It's become just the norm.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It's so like, and it's so funny. I don't think many people disagree. I think most people are like, yeah, I could be better, or like, you shouldn't be on your phone as much, but we all just do it. And it's just something to be better on, something to be aware of. And I'll definitely, even especially after now I put this out there to the universe. Yeah. It's something I'll be working on. It's like, I'll be setting a standard for myself. Maybe I don't know what that looks like yet. I'll have to think about it and really put it to work, right? And come up with the process of how I'm actually going to make sure that I follow through with it, because that's what this is all about. Yeah. You have to have a process in place to do really anything.
So I'm glad you brought that up. So there should be trigger and reward systems. I feel like a lot of people, they go with the David Goggins approach. He's unique in the fact that he just loves suffering, and with no reward on the other side. But to properly train a human, right? The research has been done. I'm not going to quote any studies because I don't know them offhand, but the reward system works way better than the punishment system does. You know what I mean? For most people, like, so if you reward yourself, say, hey, I go 2 hours without my phone, I get this. Say it's something you really want. You know what I mean? It trains your brain to go that long, and then gives you that carrot or reward on the other side of it. And then over time, you're actually training yourself to get rid of that habit or dependency that you're on, whatever it is, right? Because we all love watching someone like David Goggins, who can just smash himself into the ground all day long with this mental toughness, and everybody wants to be that way, but how long do they last, right?
He's just different, though. Right. Like, not everybody's built that way.
Right. I mean, and so
I'm convinced you can eventually. I feel like anybody could probably train themselves to be that way, but nobody's actually gonna do it unless they have to. Yeah. He's just crazy enough to be like, he tells himself he has to.
Right.
So he does it.
Well, he plays games in his own mind, right? You have to do that, and it works for him. Like that's why I love CrossFit. I get into hard workouts. You get to that point where you want to slow down or stop, but you play these little mini games in that workout to keep you going. Get to this. Just get to this next seven reps, get to that. All right.
Yeah.
Your body, mind resets. Like, you ever run like the Boston Marathon? Like, same thing. You hit a wall. Like, when I did this years ago when I was a lot younger, but you hit a wall, but then you're like, all right, just a little further. And once you are able to you convince your brain, like your brain starts to tell you to stop, and then you just keep going, and then it just resets. It's like, all right, he's not going to stop. I'm going to reset now.
Yeah.
And it keeps doing that. But the reward system anyway is the easier system to do it with. I would with things like the phone, like, or whatever, you say, hey, I'm going to go 2 hours without this. Then I get, maybe I get 10 minutes of Instagram. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and that makes sense. Yeah, it's just something to be aware of, because technology is just, it's everywhere. It's literally just dominates most people's lives these days. And just, I think we all, I'll speak for myself. I won't say all, but I think most people can improve on that. But one dependency that I wanted to get to was alcohol.
It's probably this one. I knew it.
Alcohol.
I knew
it. Because it's definitely something that, I've been dependent on.
Yep.
And I talked about this a little bit in episode 5 when we talked about PTSD, where I drank for 8 months, just 8 months every day almost, just to push aside, things that I didn't want to be thinking about or experiencing at the time. And did it again, went through a divorce 2 years ago. Same thing, 8 months, just drank every day. And it's because both of those events were obviously difficult, but I was dependent on alcohol to make me feel a certain way.
Yep.
I was dependent on it to help me escape certain feelings. And it's for me, and I'm lucky. I'm very fortunate to be able to recognize things before they get too bad, and I'm able to like pick up on things, I guess. Like, it didn't take a DUI.
Right, that's what I was actually about to ask you. In both those events, like, what caused you to, get out of it? Was it a friend? Was it a person, or was it really just you being self-aware?
So the first time was, after the deployment, it was my ex, who was basically, she, and I called it out to her credit.
Yep, you did.
She's the reason I got help the first time, because I didn't want to, I didn't want to lose what we had. So that's what it was the first time. It was taking a step back and realizing that, it's time to start just only drinking in social settings. And it was able to just do that and function more normally in that sense. The last time, which again, that was after the divorce, drank a ton for like 6-8 months. But for that, I got to a point where, I wasn't feeling that great physically. And like, I could tell, like, I wasn't looking very different, but I just wasn't feeling like great. And,
absolutely.
I think I started to notice a little bit in my face, like maybe a little puffiness, or I don't remember, but like, just, I didn't feel like me.
Yep.
And I was like, when you're drinking 6 days a week, you're not going to feel great. You're going to wake up feeling sluggish and hungover some of those days. Cause some nights for me anyways, I would just overdo it some nights.
Yeah.
And so the next day, and I knew it was a problem when like guys would be like, oh, you want to golf tomorrow morning? Saturday morning at 7 a.m. I'm like, I'm going to get up at 7 a.m., 6 o'clock in the morning to golf on Saturday. Like, I'm going out Friday.
Yeah.
And so that's like part of like just the self-recognition and being like, all right, if I can't go play golf that early, which, I go start drinking at 8 o'clock in the morning playing golf. Like, and a lot of guys do that, so it's not abnormal. But when you start like planning your days and scheduling events around drinking, it's an issue.
That for sure. And especially now I get to my age. I'm a couple of years ahead of you, I think. So you have one night of drinking. Like, I'll sip socially like I am right now. But if I go out drinking, like, and like not even get after it, I'm talking about just maybe a couple hours extended, out there drinking, the next day I'm complete garbage. I can't. It's not worth it.
Yeah. And another thing I found, like, it was on the nights where I did take it a little too far and have like one or two that more than maybe I should, I would, like, it would take me to either a sad place or an angry place.
It's always that's the thing about alcohol, right? It's never gonna make you feel better. maybe in the moment you feel like you are, but the next day,
Yeah.
absolutely, you're going to be in a more depressed state. It's just that they can prove. It's just a depressant. It's never you're never going to wake up the next day being more energized from the night of drinking ever.
No.
You may hope that it's not as bad. You hope to mitigate it the best you can. And like, hopefully I don't feel horrible. You know what I mean? But who wants to get, you know, that's what I'm talking about. The good thing with your last drinking thing is that you didn't get to a state where that became normal, because you said you always felt like crap. People who have a dependency to alcohol long term, they just that's their normal state. Yeah. They don't know what it's gone so long. They don't know what it feels like to be normal.
Well, and I think part of the problem was that I was starting to feel, even though I wasn't feeling great and I was picking up on that, it was starting to feel normal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
So it was starting to feel normal that I didn't feel normal or good.
And that's what I mean. I think it was good that you, like, because when it gets to that point, then things get real tough.
And I noticed that just emotionally, like, it was taking me to those angrier places more often.
Yep.
In those, like, places where I would just start beating myself up over the past or things that, like, I couldn't control anymore. Yeah, so now I pick my spots with alcohol, right? Yep. Like, I've learned, like we're almost 2 months, just about 2 months into the year, I've drank twice.
That's awesome.
So I'm just like, I'm not like I don't drink anymore, but I'm like, I don't drink often.
Love that.
Yeah. And like last night I went and I went out to Putnam, Connecticut. It's my favorite restaurant, Courthouse. And I ended up running into some friends of mine who, you know, I hung out with a million times, and they're like, Diet Coke. I'm like, yeah, man, I don't really drink that much anymore.
That's awesome. I love hearing that, man.
Yeah, and I still enjoy it. Like last weekend, I had some wine, a couple glasses of wine, felt great. It's just I'm picking my spots with it now because it's not because I don't enjoy it. I do enjoy it. It's just I love feeling like I love the clarity my mind has now. Just
absolutely,
like I'm always on, and I love that.
Yep.
You know, I love, like, I would be like, when the last like time I was drinking a lot, like I'd be in like meetings for work the next day, and I'm just like, I couldn't come up with the thoughts and ideas that.
So I say that all the time. Like even a regular, like just a whatever you call a standardized drink, and maybe 4 or 5 drinks, whatever. The whole next day, I would not make any important decisions. I don't trust my brain. I don't trust my thought process. I just won't do it. I was like, nope, I'm just gonna push this off till tomorrow, and that's just horrible. Like, you know what I mean? And I really resonate when you say that you're on all the time. I absolutely love that. That's cool. You know what I mean? I mean, we should be optimizing as humans and not poisoning ourselves. We know it's poison. It is, you know? So
one thing I'll say is like, one thing that's kind of starting to like annoy me a little bit with some of the people online is when they're like, oh, I don't drink at all. Like alcohol is just bad for you. There's no good that can come from it.
You see trends online right now. What's the big ones they're talking about? All of them. Right?
It's alcohol, entrepreneurship and alcohol.
Alcohol, like getting rid of. Let's just say like you should not be, you know, alcohol and this and that. Like but they're all saying the same thing at the same time.
But
they're riding a wave.
Yeah, but it's like one guy that I really like. The other day he's like, let's be honest, you don't like the taste of alcohol. You don't drink alcohol because it tastes good. And I'm like, I love the taste of red wine. Like I can drink that like water, you know, and I don't judge. Like maybe you think alcohol doesn't taste good, but you know what? There's some stuff that I think tastes pretty good.
But I think and again, it's kind of going back to, you know, they're taking their opinion of how they view something. Like they probably don't like the taste of alcohol and think that everybody adopts that, which is not true.
Yeah. And it's just like, I kind of like that there's some new, almost like a wave of sobriety. Like it's becoming more cool and more common to drink less.
Well, coming out of the pandemic, that's huge.
I like that.
Because remember, there's huge dependency during the pandemic, right?
Oh, I drank every day.
People were drinking. People who don't normally.
I think we were drinking 2 bottles of wine a night or a bottle and a half.
I feel like that's where because I don't typically drink at home, ever, right? But I was going out more, like after the pandemic last year, all that stress, and I know I was going to more social settings and having alcohol. I'm like, man, this is not me. Like I think you just said it, and maybe you didn't say, but you get to a point where like, this isn't me. Yeah. Like what am I doing? You know?
Yeah. Or this is becoming me, and this is like, this can't happen.
Oh yeah, that's not gonna happen.
That's kind of how it was for me. I was like, all right, I'm starting to feel normal with all this drinking, but I knew it wasn't making me feel good. It wasn't making me feel good. It was more like an emotional thing. Like I said earlier, it was taking me to either either extreme anger or extreme sadness. And there was like really wasn't much in between. So it was time to like, all right, drink, you got to drink less. Like I said earlier, I pick my spots now. Like, so weddings, you know, a nice night out, like here and there.
No, I was impressed. Like,
happy events.
We went out to celebrate our first episode, right? And I don't think you didn't have a drink. Oh no, you did.
No, I drank.
It's the first time.
That was the first time this year.
But there was other times.
But
so
we're
there
like
was
6 weeks
But there was
into the
other
year.
times we'd go to your favorite spots. We'd meet you, you know, the spots you like to go, and you're just drinking Diet Coke and water. I'm like, that's cool. You know what I mean? I respect that a lot, especially from someone like it's automatic. Automatic, like you're gonna have this, right?
Yeah.
So it's cool. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that's. I'm glad we were able to touch upon alcohol as dependency because I think a lot of people do it.
Good.
I think a lot of people do it though. I think we know a lot of people that do it. And I think it's just normal to drink now, and it's abnormal if you don't. So I think that's the only, like, you hear it all the time. Like, that's the one thing you tell people you don't drink. They're like, huh? They think it's weird.
Well, they assume you had an event. They assume
DUI
alcohol either
or-
ruined your life, you had a DUI. They find it abnormal that somebody would not drink. I know a couple of people in my life who've never had a drop of alcohol. I'm like, man, that's cool. I mean,
Really?
never in their life. I'm like, wow. Especially as the pressures as a kid, like how do you get through your adolescent childhood? Like for those of you guys that went to college, you know what I mean? Like how can you go through all that and not?
Well, think about it.
try it?
I'm most impressed by, of all people, that had never had a drink, Donald Trump. Look at it, like, just the guy
Really?
who's, he's never drank before.
Ever.
That's what he said.
Wow.
And think about all the parties and then being in the life that life that he's been in his entire life. You know what I mean? All through the 90s, all those parties, no alcohol.
I think
at all.
it could be easier, and this is just my opinion. Like, of course, take this for what it is, guys. I have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to this, but if you get through, because you remember when you first started drinking as a kid, you don't like the taste of it.
No.
And
Well,
you
you always start with something terrible.
but you always do it anyways, and you push through and you get to the other side of it. As an adult, you're not going to be willing to do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As an adult, you can be, screw this. Like, oh, this tastes horrible.
Yeah.
I'm not drinking this.
Yeah.
Why would I do this to myself? So I feel like if you can, and this is just my opinion, this is not based off of anything, guys, but if you can get through like your adolescent and your early 20s without ever drinking alcohol, why would you start?
Yeah. If it's not at that point, you would, like, I had a friend who in college didn't drink, and I think he drinks now, but he didn't drink in college. I was always impressed by that. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. So yeah, we'll move on from that. But yeah, one of the things I want to talk about, the last thing, is when it comes to dependency, you know, you see it a lot. We talked about alcohol, technology. We talked a little bit about people dependency. And, you know, I think for myself, just how I grew up, I don't think I ever had the problem of being dependent on like another person. I think if anything, for me, I always pushed people away and said, like, I don't need other people. I'll figure it out on my own. I don't know what your experience is with that, or, you know, I know in a relationship, it's, you know, people kind of become dependent on one another, but I see that more as just kind of a shared responsibility thing than a dependency. But I'd like to know your kind of
so
your opinion on that.
just on that part, just where my brain went when you were talking about it. So to answer your question, no, I feel like I'm very never needed to be with people. That's why I haven't dated that much. Like you count the people I've dated my entire life. It's not a lot. And it's not like I've had long-term relationships either. Just outside of my marriage, they were actually not very long at all, but I can definitely be by myself. But the codependency with your spouse can be dangerous too, though. If you have no identity outside of your marriage and you completely codependent on each other, I feel like that cannot be a good thing either. You know what I mean? Because you lose. I know you become one. I love that. You know what I mean? You are one person, and all the things that like, but you still need to have something outside of that. Because then, what if, God forbid, what if something happens, right? And that person is no longer with you. You know what I mean? Or that person changes, or you're growing. You know what I mean? I feel like if you don't have your sense of self outside of that, and I could be wrong, this is just my opinion, that codependent relationships seem to not work. I can say that I can just say it from personal experience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like there was nothing really going on in my last relationship. I just feel like we were we really didn't have many friends outside of our marriage.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I could be, again, I'm just talking from my personal experiences. There's nothing to back this up, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious your thoughts on that because, like I said, I never really felt like that. However, I will say, like, after when I first got divorced, I did, I started off just a few months, just very low key, didn't really do a lot, didn't date a lot. Even the whole time I was single, really, I dated like sporadically, like just like one person for like months at a time instead of like lots and lots of people. Like, but it was, I don't know if that was just a dependency thing or like not wanting to be alone or what, but like I never felt like I was just dependent on them for anything, but it was nice to like get out of the house,
Yeah.
But I did do a lot of like sitting around. It wasn't like I was seeing these people, whoever I dated at the time, like every day. It was like a couple times a week, and then the other days it was great just being alone. So it was nice to have company, but I've never felt like dependent on somebody. I've always, I would say in my marriage I was actually, we depended on each other for things. But
Absolutely,
it wasn't
I don't
like
see how you can't be.
not in like, but I don't think it was like in a negative way. I think it was just
Mine, I mean,
like I said, shared responsibilities.
mine probably wasn't either. I just feel like when I met my ex, it was at a time in my life where I really needed that stability, and I got it from her. And so I really, I really depended a lot on her opinions, right? And what she said. And I really didn't have. I really pretty much defaulted to that the whole time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So, and if I'm being really open, and if she hears this, she'll agree, I'm sure. But, and I didn't really find my own sense of self till after the marriage ended. You know what I mean? And I actually spent a lot of time by myself, like a year and a half, I think. And then really got to know me and know who I was and what I needed. And what and kind of that's when my growth started. I really feel like that's when my growth started.
I can actually say probably now that you kind of put it in that perspective and from that point of view, actually I would say very similar. I would say very similar in the sense of right time in my life, needed that. And then it was but it wasn't until afterwards where I really figured out like who I am, like alone.
Right. Exactly.
And just it took a lot of work.
And that might happen when you get married so young. I mean, we were pretty young. I think you guys were pretty young too, right?
Late 20s.
Oh, late 20s.
I think 27.
I think we were like early 20s, right?
You were. I don't know what you were.
I think so.
I didn't even know you when you got married.
No, of course not.
Because you didn't even know you then. You were already married when I met you. But yeah, no. So that's just those are like the three biggest areas, like as far as substances, people, technology. We touched on all those things regarding dependency, but just circling back before we kind of wrap up, just circling back to kind of our principles here with what we're trying to accomplish would be the standard. It's you can have certain vices and different things as you're trying to better yourself, but you can't have too many, and they can't be big ones. Like I started working on a lot of different things with myself, as far as like working on patience, working on my anger, working on my just emotional things, right? But I still had the alcohol thing going.
Yeah.
So I was still drinking way more than I should have, but I was still focused on all these other aspects of how I can be better. So you can have those things, but you need to be.
So we're striving for progress, not perfection. So I think it's what you're trying to get at, right?
And that's exactly what I'm trying to get at. Like you're always going to have something. You're always going to have a vice of some sort.
And I want to really nail on that because I think people, again, just by the social media world right now, I feel like they harp. It's either all or nothing. Like, no, we're looking for progress, not perfection. It's okay that you have these things, these vices, whatever it is. Just recognize that you do, and you're trying to work on it, right? So that's even just like me. I recently found God, and I'm just really trying to, get sin out of my life. But it's going to be a process. It's going to be, it's not going to happen overnight. You know what I mean? I know that, and I'm just as long as I'm working towards that goal and talking to other Christians about it, they kind of really, they reaffirm that. Like nobody's perfect. Nobody.
I don't care who you are. Like regardless of what regardless of what people see from you, there's some shit there. Yeah. You got some shit. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're projecting out to the world or how perfect people think you are, how perfect you think you are.
Yeah.
You have some shit. Yeah. Everybody does.
Everybody does.
And
Some people are just better at hiding it. That's all it is.
Oh, that's all it is.
Yeah.
That's all it. Everybody's got something, and you just nailed it with that. As far as people just can hide it better. What gave me the most clarity in trying to just change and be better over the last 18 months, 19 months now. You know, like I said, I worked on all those other little things, but what really buttoned it up at the end and kind of pushed me over the goal line was same as you, like, right, getting back into reading the Bible and the alcohol, cutting back on the alcohol substantially. Those two things, like I said, they really just pushed me over the goal line. And I'm normal, right? Like everybody. I have, now that I don't have these things,
Yep.
there's still other things. Like I still have my moments where anger's an issue or like a little bit of an outburst is an issue. Like I'm human and you're going to be human. So it's just important to realize that. It's important to realize that, you're always going to have something. You're not going to be perfect. You can try, but it just won't happen ever.
So it's kind of, and just, I know we want to wrap this up. I just because talk about the dependency or just being like addicted. So when I was younger, it was like cigarettes, right? Then when I got rid of cigarettes, it turned into like, oh, I really got into coffee or whatever. I felt like there was always something, you know what I mean? That was like, typically that's what happens with, I think, dependency. Something replaces it.
Yeah.
So you fill that hole or whatever that is completely with something good. You're going to find something else to fill it with. You know what I mean? And I think that's what most people do and don't realize they're doing, you know, with addictions, especially addictions. Right. And so like, you're so used to this does this for me. And then if you rip that out, you see that a lot in the CrossFit space, right? Like a lot of people, who used to be addicts, right? They get into CrossFit because they have that compulsive, they have that personality they need to fill. And that's just a good outlet for them. But then you got to make sure you address that need that you're skipping over. Like you're filling it in with something. You have to address that at some point, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that's a good point to end with.
Yeah.
I think you nailed it there. So I'm not even going to touch upon it. Yeah. We're just going to move on. And
all right, let's do it.
I just really appreciate everybody tuning in for this episode here. We obviously touched on a lot. It's probably one of our longer episodes that we've done. Yep. But again, as always, just really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your engagement with us. Keep sending us the feedback. You guys are the reasons we have new mics. So thanks for that. And again, just stay engaged. Follow us. Like us. We are on Spotify, Rumble, and YouTube, as well as Instagram. And find us as well on LinkedIn. So thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Be the standard.